Hey, welcome in. Once we get a critical mass, I'm going to start talking about lipoprotein A. Just briefly, I had a live where I was talking about something called lipoprotein A and the fact that I had it checked. And I was talking about, that my level was very high. That for this particular concentration, a high level is 125, and my level was 250, which is twice that amount. And so I've been working on ways to reduce my cardiovascular disease risk, knowing that I have this lipoprotein A that's elevated. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Mary Branch. I'm a cardiologist. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Mary Branch. I'm a cardiologist, and I work primarily in the hospital, in a rural hospital in Kentucky. And I really enjoy rural medicine. I think there's a high need for cardiologists there, and there's certainly a high need to understand cardiovascular disease prevention, because prevention of cardiovascular disease is the best way to treat cardiac disease, especially in the climate that we're in, where we are dealing with this big, beautiful bill, cuts in Medicare, cuts in Medicaid, and just staffing issues. Physician morale is down. The cardiology workforce is expected to, decline because a lot of cardiologists are close to retirement age. And so it is very, very important to focus on heart disease prevention. The best way to treat anything is to prevent it. So, like I said, it is just really critical these days because of the shortages, of not just physicians, but also of cardiologists, is going to really impact our outcomes. And we've been doing very, very well with reducing heart attack related deaths with medications. And so we don't want to lose that momentum. We want to keep it going and make sure that we're still going to get, reduction in heart attack related deaths, heart failure, etc. So let's get into it. So lipoprotein A. So one of my friends was like, yeah, I was listening to your video, but I'm not really sure, what is lipoprotein A? Why were you talking about it? Why is it a big deal? Lipoprotein A is a molecule. It carries cholesterol. The reason why it's important is because lipoprotein A itself gives you, it's an elevated level is associated with an independent risk of cardiovascular disease. What does that mean? That means just that level being high lets you know that you have increased risk for cardiovascular disease, regardless of any other issues that may be going on that may put you at risk for cardiovascular disease. That includes diabetes, hypertension, smoking, etc. So there are three important facts that I want you all to know for lipoprotein A. Number one is mostly genetic. So I'm looking at my notes here. LPA levels are 70% to 90% genetically inherited. So what that means is you essentially only need to check it once in your lifetime, and it's actually recommended now by the Association of the ACC, the American College of Cardiology, the American Heart Association, that you should have this lipoprotein A checked at least once in your lifetime. Now, if you're 20, I would necessarily recommend it. But if you're 40s, 50s, then I would recommend getting that lipoprotein A checked. Can be from your primary care. You don't necessarily need to see a cardiologist to have the lipoprotein A checked. But if it's elevated, it's not a bad idea to see a cardiologist so you can get some early prevention medications. All right. So also, levels may vary depending on if you're in the hospital for certain reasons, like kidney issues, things like that. So if you're going to check your lipoprotein A, it's good to get a level when you're just in clinic, you're not sick, you're not in the hospital. That's going to give you essentially what your level is. All right. So the second most important thing about lipoprotein A is it's not a part of your typical lipid panel. So when your primary care orders a lipid panel looking at your cholesterol, lipoprotein A is not going to be included. Exactly. So you have to request it. And so, when you're seeing your primary care doctor, you want to ask, in addition to my lipid panel, can you check a lipoprotein A or an LPA? Because it's a separate order. It's not part of just a general workup that you're going to have during your yearly physical. So this is something that you want to ask and be proactive about with your primary care, asking about this particular level. All right. So the third thing is, this is kind of the tricky part, is that, currently there are no approved medications that we know of that will lower LPA levels. So when you have a high LPA, it can be kind of nerve-wracking, because it's like, I can't just take a medicine to make it go away. So what I decided to do is, managing my LDL. So my LDL was maybe close to 100. Ideally, you want your LDL to be less than 100. So I work a lot. I'm stressed. I have a daughter who's 7, and when she's with me, I'm a single mom. So, and I'm working in this very busy rural hospital as the only non-invasive cardiologist on the inpatient side, when I'm there. So, it's been hard for me to keep up with my exercise routine. Diet sometimes slips, it happens. And I know this is just a phase, and I'll work on getting back to everything. But I also travel. I fly once a week. I fly home, and then I fly to work once a week, so that I can make sure I can go to work, take care of that priority, and then go home and take care of my daughter. So it's been challenging to being very diligent with my diet, exercise routine, and everything. So what I decided to do was go on a GLP-1 to go on Zepbound. So I have a primary care appointment this summer. I've been bad in pushing it off because I've been doing other things. But I'll get to it. And with this GLP-1, I haven't eaten as much, and I haven't eaten as much red meat, things like that. So I imagine my LDL will be much lower than 100. So again, the point of that long story is, by not eating as much, I'm certainly not eating as much, animal products that contain cholesterol. And by doing that, hopefully I'll be able to lower my LDL to keep it sustained and, significantly lower than 100. But otherwise, I don't smoke, I don't have diabetes, I don't have sleep apnea. Thank God I don't have family history. I have good genes as far as I know otherwise. My grandmother lived to be 107. My great aunt lived to be 110. My grandfather lived into his 90s. My father lived about mid 70s, but he smoked for about 50 years. So thank goodness, it seems like my genetics are fairly resilient, but I still just want to make sure that I'm keeping track and making sure that I'm kind of diligent about, like I said, keeping my LDL down and doing the best that I can to reduce my cardiovascular disease risk. And then otherwise, that's about it. I don't think about it every day. I'm not going to sit there and think about, what am I going to do about my LPA and worry about it? Once you've done because I put action into it, because I've signed up to start a GLP-1, that's it. Once I've done all I can, I typically just kind of stand. That's it. I'm taking the GLP-1. It's helping me curb my appetite. It's helping me reduce, animal products, things like that, so that my LDL will stay low. I don't smoke. So I'm doing everything that I can. So I'm not going to worry about a number. Cause beyond that, it's just a number. So, I just kind of keep it moving beyond that. But of course, it is something that kind of creeps up, but I just remember that I'm doing my best, and that's all you can do. The other thing is really interesting. It's good timing that we're talking about lipoprotein A, because there's a trial, phase 3 clinical trial called Horizon, and it's actually going to be completed, it says, within the next 7 days. So what this trial is looking at is, it wants to know, with this trial, they're trying to determine whether, will this particular medication, will lowering your LPA with this particular medication, will that actually lead to a reduction in your risk for heart disease, heart attacks? And so we don't know yet, but with this trial, we'll get an idea of whether actually lowering it makes a difference or not. Because it's interesting, right? It's kind of like this genetic test. We know lowering LDL makes a difference. We know lowering your A1C makes a difference. And we know those are associated with cardiovascular disease. But with LPA, it doesn't vary. It's kind of a genetic test. We know it's associated with heart disease. But what we don't know quite yet is if you lower LPA, will that lead to a reduction in cardiovascular disease risk? So I'm excited to hear about it, because that might be something else I may look into and see if I can take that medication as well, just to, again, try to do everything that I can to reduce my risk of cardiovascular disease. So like I said, it's supposed to be completed around June 30th. So if I hear any tea, if I hear the tea from any of my old attendings I used to work with, one of my attendings is he's major in the lipid guidelines and the cardiac disease prevention committees and stuff like that. One of my co-fellows he's major in, heart disease prevention in those circles with the American Heart Association. So if I get the tea, I'm gonna give you all the tea and let you know what happened with this trial. Did anything come out of it? Is there something else that we can do to help reduce our risk of cardiovascular disease? So that's the big thing. That's really all I wanted to say and update everyone about. Like I said, I think, knowledge is power. And I just want to close with the fact that there are a lot of changes going on the other side as it relates to hospital systems that may close down, physicians that are burnt out, nurses that are burnt out. So the system is really struggling right now. And so it's really, really important that y'all do the best that you can to try to prevent cardiovascular disease, so that, you are not mixed up in this systemic mess of, trying to get to a hospital, waiting in the emergency room and all these things. And, you don't want to get there. So the most important thing is just to stay up to date with what you can do to mitigate your risk, lower your risk for cardiovascular disease. That's extraordinarily, extraordinarily important. That's going to work better for you than medications. And it's always the cheapest things, the simplest things, which is eating clean as best as you can. I always say, you can slip here and there with your diet, but just try not to make it a habit. So if Monday through Thursday you're eating clean and simple, and then Friday through Sunday, you get a little extra, steak or whatever, then that's okay. But you just want to not make that a habit. And then you want to do your best to walk as much as you can, at least 7,000 steps or so, if you can, per day. So that, again, you can, reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease. But every step helps to reduce your risk. So just, for a lot of folks, you just need to get up. You just need to get up. You need to stop sitting so much and just get up. So try not to sit for more than 3 hours or so. Try to get up as much as you can, certainly during the day. So if you work virtually or something like that, and you really don't get a lot of movement throughout the day, then I would recommend just trying to, for an hour, just take a break and go for a walk. Like my friends say in the South, just put your feet in some grass and just get outside and kind of really reap the benefits of just being in nature. Again, you don't have to run a marathon, but just walk a little bit, walk your dog, walk with some friends. And just, even if it's once a week, we can get a really extensive time out in nature. That's a good thing. But once a day, just for a little bit, if you're not moving, like I said, if you're working virtually or just sitting a lot, just do your best to just kind of get up, take a break. It'll make a huge difference, and it'll help your sleep. It'll make you sleep better. It helps everything. Everything gets better. Your sexual life, gets better. Like I said, your sleep gets better. Your mood gets better. It's really just a magical thing, just getting more exercise and being out in nature. So I'm talking about all these medications, but really that's the most important thing as it relates to prevention, are your important habits and those atomic habits that you want to do your best to be consistent with. If you fall off the horse, that's fine. We all do. But then every day is a new day, and every day is a new opportunity. So Brett says, I walk after every meal or do a light activity, and my A1C went from 5.9 to 4.9. Look at that. Yes. Dropped weight as well and switched to ground turkey instead of ground beef. I eat chicken and salmon primarily for meat. Perfect. Like, that's not even what he did. Is just his A1C went from 5.9, which is kind of the pre-diabetic range, to 4.9, and he made these subtle changes, but they're huge. These subtle changes, every single day is going to add up, exponentially, because he's reducing his risk of heart disease with just little changes. Going to ground turkey, taking, a light walk after a meal. That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. And he's not saying I had to run, a marathon to get this data better. He's saying I made these very reasonable small changes that will add up and compound, and he's going to get that compounded benefit from what he's doing. So again, leave questions if you have any. But I hope you all take care. And as I get more information about the Horizon trial, I'll let you know, and I'll give you all the tea. All right? Take care.